So if you saw my Instagram post earlier today, then you're aware that I'm implementing a caffeine curfew. And a lot of people wanted to know what the heck a caffeine curfew even is and why it's beneficial. And of course, I'll touch base on that in this video, as well as how tough it was to actually implement, because I've been doing this for about 3 weeks now. And further, if I'm gonna be giving up coffee entirely. So the caffeine curfew itself, in short, is the time of day that I stop consuming caffeine. Or for me, it's basically when I stop drinking coffee, because that is my source of caffeine. And the curfew time that I've selected is 7:30 a.m., which is not unreasonable, seeing as I usually start my day around 4. So there's enough time in that period for me to have, 2 cups of coffee if I so desire, maybe 3 if I'm really feeling the need for it, or the desire for it, if you will. Now, the reason I've implemented this is because sleep is one of the most powerful contributing factors to our success in the weight room, as well as relative to our physique development, and of course, optimization of our health and fitness profiles long term. Now, when it comes to training, I'm intoxicated by the pursuit of progressions. Those black and white metrics where you know what you're doing is actually contributing to your performance over time. I don't like to work out just to do difficult things. I have no interest in working out to be sore or tired or to puke. That is of no interest to me whatsoever. I train to get better. I train to improve, and I need metrics that reflect that are black and white. Now, then the question becomes, what can you do to optimize your life so that the habits you're developing and building upon over time are actually contributing progressively to those outcomes under the bar. Now, sleep is often overlooked, but it's a game changer. And so years ago, I became very strict with my sleep regimen. And I rarely, if ever, budge on my sleep. And those who are closest in my inner circle can attest to the fact that I will literally show up to an event for 15 minutes and leave, simply because it's almost my bedtime. And I have no issue making an appearance, I have no issue showing up, but I'm not going to sacrifice my sleep quality or quantity just to be social. As well as the fact that I'm very diligent with maintaining a regular sleep and wake up cycle. So knowing as much, the quantity of sleep that I was getting is not so much of an issue. I consistently get, 6.5 to 8 hours of sleep every night, usually over the 7-hour mark. That's something that I've seen success with, and I've been very diligent with maintaining consistency relative to that habit. Now, the question then becomes, how can I improve the quality of that sleep that I'm getting? Because it wasn't uncommon for me to wake up after 7.5 hours of sleep and still feel kind of lethargic and generally crappy. And that was frustrating, because that impacts performance as well. Anyone who is moderately strong and further along the spectrum will attest to the fact that waking up and feeling sluggish or lethargic really makes it tough to get under the bar on heavy training days and make the weight clang and bang. It becomes a task. You often look at it as drudgery. I call them punch the clock workouts, because you literally just show up, load the bar, get the work done and leave. But sometimes, more often than not, when you feel that way, your performance suffers as a byproduct. So I started asking myself, what was I doing in my life that was not progressive relative to the quality of my sleep? What habits did I have that were actually proving to be detrimental to the quality of sleep that I got? I felt I had mastered or had a very strong grasp on getting enough, but now I wanted to make that sleep better. And so doing some further research into it, reading a lot of the work that Sean Stevenson has done, which is phenomenal and I highly recommend, I realized that I had a big issue with caffeine consumption. Now, generally, throughout the course of the day, I drink water and black coffee. That's it. Tea maybe once a month, but I'm an avid coffee drinker and I drink a ton of water. I don't put anything in my water. I don't put anything in my coffee. It's very basic, very simple. But the problem was how much coffee I was actually drinking. So to give you a very general overview of a common day in the life, first thing in the morning, for sure, before 8 a.m., I was 2 or 3 cups of coffee deep, for sure. Then usually around 12 or 1 o'clock, another 1 or 2 cups of coffee. And then if I was feeling unusually fatigued on a given day, which would probably happen maybe twice a week on a consistent enough basis, another cup around 4 o'clock in the late afternoon, early evening. And as you can imagine, that's a lot of caffeine being consumed. And I didn't really think all that much of it because, you know, I'm not putting any crap into my coffee. I'm not mixing anything into it. It's just black coffee. So from a physique perspective, I knew I wasn't, you know, consuming 1,000 calories of sugar because I was downing double-doubles all day long. And so, unbeknownst to me, I had developed a habit that was actually quite regressive considering my sleep quality. Now, the reason why is because caffeine actually has a half-life. So, to explain this simply, if you were to consume 200 milligrams of caffeine, it would take 8 hours for it to halve. So after 8 hours, you would still have 100 milligrams of caffeine, and then 8 hours after that, you would have 50 in your system. I didn't do the math on how much caffeine I was consuming, but it was a lot. There's a lot of caffeine being consumed on a regular basis for me. And considering not just how much I was consuming and how long that would take to leave my system, the fact that I was topping it up, not just a couple of times a day, but even further later into the afternoon and evening. And this is extremely detrimental because if you're trying to go to sleep, but you're consuming a stimulant, it is going to grossly impact your hormone profile, right? So my cortisol and melatonin levels and my adrenaline levels were all out of whack relative to my circadian rhythms. And so even though I was able to fall asleep and generally stay asleep, I was not getting great quality sleep on a consistent enough basis, especially on those nights where I was having, you know, a cup of coffee at 3, 4 o'clock, because it was so close to my bedtime that, you know, it was unrealistic for me to even have 8 hours of time left before I went to bed. So there was a lot of caffeine remaining in my system on those days. And realizing that, it was kind of eye-opening to me because I was like, well, that makes a lot of sense. Because reflecting on my habits, the days I had coffee later into the day were the days I generally had the worst sleep. And assuming that was a training day the next day, like say for example I had a bad day Friday, drank a coffee at 4 p.m. and then had to get under the bar Saturday, if I felt poorly, I was much more likely to consume coffee later in the afternoon and evening on that day because of how lethargic I felt. And as you can quickly see, this becomes a very, very vicious cycle. And it might be a cycle that you find yourself in, because what ends up happening, and this is probably very relatable for you if you're an avid coffee drinker or you consume some source of caffeine on a regular basis, is you end up going to bed having all this caffeine still in your system. You don't get restful sleep. You don't get quality sleep. You wake up the next day, you feel generally like trash. And feeling like trash, you then, what do? You go to the source of energy that you know is consistently going to fuel you. You grab a coffee, right? You grab a coffee and you likely grab a little more coffee than you might usually because you're more fatigued than you usually are. And if you have to do something that is mentally or physically demanding later into the afternoon or early evening, you're much more likely to grab another coffee or another source of however you get your caffeine. And that becomes closer and closer to your bedtime, and it disrupts your sleep quality further and further, and the next day you wake up even more fatigued and exhausted, and it just continues to cycle on, and you develop a deeper and deeper biological debt that becomes further and further challenging to dig yourself back out of again. So I tend to be an all or nothing person, within reason. So this was a habit where I was like, you know what, I don't feel like I'm drinking coffee later into the day because I need it. I just kind of want it, right? I didn't feel reliance on it, which may have changed how I approach this if I had felt that reliance on it. So seeing as I didn't really feel that, I just kind of drank it because it was 12 o'clock, creature of habit, I said, you know what? I'm going to put a curfew in place. Generally, my morning coffee, I'm done by usually 6 o'clock, but if I don't have an appointment first thing in the morning, maybe 7:30 at the latest. So I said, you know what? That's my curfew. Done. Simple. That gives me more than enough time for the majority of the caffeine in my system to half-life itself right out by the time I go to bed. And I'm not topping it up at any point throughout the day. And so you might be wondering, how crappy did I feel? Now, I've been doing this for about 3 weeks now, so I haven't been doing it a long time, but I've been very diligent with ensuring that 7:30 is the cutoff. I don't drink coffee after that. In fact, I had someone bring me a coffee the other day, and I said, I'll save it for tomorrow, thank you very much, but I'm done right now. If you want to hang out, we're going to have to drink water. That's how exciting of a social butterfly I can be. So, first week was the worst, for sure. Fortunately, only had a headache once, so I was surprised by that. It wasn't a severe headache. I wasn't, bent over in agony, crying, on the floor. Just a little bit of a headache that, was annoying more than anything. But I did notice I was tired throughout the day. Like come 12, 1 o'clock, and I'm generally the type of person that I'll take a nap almost every day. Especially on training days, that's very common. The heavier the training day, the more likely I am to take a nap. By nap, 15, 20 minutes, and I'm up ready to rock and roll. But I was whipped. Like the first week, there was, I think, 3 days where I took a 2 or 3 hour nap midday, and I wanted nothing to do with anything related to productivity whatsoever. I could not drag myself to the computer to work on tasks that needed to be done. And by the time I got there, I just kind of plugged away at them. And the efficiency of what I was doing was non-existent. By the end of that first week, generally, I felt fine. I didn't even notice that I wasn't having an afternoon coffee anymore. And so my energy levels have actually started to not only return, but they're actually much higher. And I would assume because of the reverse of what's happening is because I'm not having as poor quality of sleep, the quality of my sleep is improving, I'm then feeling well rested. And I've kind of created an opposite cycle where now I have more energy throughout the day. And the reason I'm noticing this is because not only do I wake up feeling more well rested, I'm much more unlikely to feel the need to take a nap. And that's interesting to me. And so where I've noticed this is on the days I don't work out, I don't feel the need for a nap whatsoever, and I don't feel much of a dip of energy at all. So it's kind of strange for me because come 1 or 2 o'clock or 12 or 1 o'clock, depending on the day, I feel fine. And I'm so used to wanting to take a nap because I feel so poorly. Part of me is like, take a 20-minute nap. I'm like, but I don't really feel like I need it. And that's encouraging. I'm also noticing on my lighter training days, I don't feel as much of a need for a nap. I'm still taking them because I definitely notice, hey, you know what? I could use a nap right now. Quick 20 minutes, refresh, reset. So 4 days a week, I still want that. But on the days I'm not training, no naps. No naps. Assuming I got a solid 7-8 hours of sleep, the quality has improved dramatically. So then the question becomes, will I eliminate coffee altogether? And I don't like to speak in absolutes simply because I never really know. At this point, what I can say is I'm extremely pleased with the outcomes of improving this habit. So it's provided a yield that is quite evident to me. My training feels better, my recovery is heightened, my energy levels have increased. This is very obvious to me. And so the yield has much been worth the adjustment in habit, in my opinion. The trade-off has been, the reward is well worth what I've had to change, what I've had to sacrifice. My afternoon coffee, whoop-de-doo. There's very few times where I really feel like I need it, especially now. So realizing that yield has been so progressive that I'm content at this point. Now, those of you who know me best know that I'm never content for long. So what will likely happen is I will now work on whatever the next biggest thing I perceive to be detrimental that I'm doing that I can improve upon. And I don't think it's going to be cutting out my morning coffee. That doesn't mean down the road I might not focus on that as I get further and further into, nitty-gritty details. But at this point, I feel like the change I've made has been so progressive that now it's time to focus on something else. What that something else might be, I'm not entirely sure yet. I'm not in a rush to make big changes, but I'm constantly reevaluating my habits and what I do on a daily basis, and looking for holes and looking for inefficiencies and things that are generally not moving me in the direction that I desire. And so if down the road that happens to be, hey, you know what, you should probably kick that altogether, I'll do it. It doesn't make a difference to me. If it's not proving progressive, if it's potentially proving detrimental in any way, then successful people do what they have to do, whether they feel like it or not. And it's a constant evolution. So as of current, I will remain a lover of coffee, and I will drink my morning coffee with joy daily. Now, if you've been struggling with your sleep quality or quantity or both, which is not surprising, you're not alone. The majority of people struggle with this. In North America alone, the number of individuals who are chronically sleep deprived is just astonishing. But if this is an area that you struggle with, it is incredibly impactful considering your performance, considering your physique development, considering your mental health, considering your future health and fitness profile, and your risk of diseases and mortality. Then it's likely something that you want to improve upon. So be aware that I will be posting some content on this on my fitness page relative to how to improve your sleep quality and quantity. And of course, if you'd like to learn more on your own, I highly recommend reading Sean Stevenson's book, Sleep Smarter. I'll post a link in the description so you can grab a copy of your own if you so desire.